The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Derrick Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
Oh, yes. The UFC is back once again this weekend, and it is in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. The inside of the UFC Apex, playing host to UFC Fight Night on ESPN+. They are going to be slanging and banging in the main event, Ian Parker. Derrick Lewis versus Sergey Spivac. This is not one of those main events that anybody is thinking is going to be the highest technical skill, be the longest fight. I think they're going to, looking at a heavyweight fight that a lot of people are going to thinking, is it going to finish inside the distance? We will get to that in our main event breakdown. But first off, Ian, how you doing? Last time I saw you, we were in New York City, sitting on the top of a studio with the Brooklyn Bridge behind us. Today we are back in basically our living rooms or offices talking about fights again. How you doing?
Yeah, you know what? It's a little bit different than being outdoor in studio, but I'm great. We got some good fights. You know, obviously not the biggest names on this card, but I see a tremendous amount of betting value coming off of last week, so I'm excited. And slanging and banging is a good way to describe this main event.
That's what we're here to talk about, baby. Making money. You know, we could talk about the fights on any other show. This one is about talking about the fights in terms of putting money into your wallet. So how are we going to do that? We'll get to the main card in a second. But first, we got to look back at UFC 281. It was a fantastic card. I got to say, probably the best card that we've seen all year. How did we do betting-wise, Mr. Parker?
You know, we went 3-2, which normally I don't love because sometimes with the juice, that kind of doesn't make it as profitable. However, this card was profitable because Michael Chandler was a plus 190 that we lost, so we didn't pay any juice there. And Dominic Reyes, minimal. Zhang Weili got us the win, so that cancels that out. So Renato Moicano and Carlos Ulberg gave us that profitable night. You know, Chandler was so close. We talked about utilizing the wrestling. He just gassed out. And Dominic Reyes did the exact opposite of what we thought it was going to be. We thought he would get it done inside the distance. Instead, a jab put him to sleep, and along with our bet. But profitable nonetheless. We're going to carry it over to this week and have a much better week this time.
Oh, and Chandler was close at plus 190. I mean, even if you're going to lose a bet, I think, you know, the viewers at home, they want to sit there and feel like at least we were on the right side. Plus 190 for Michael Chandler. He was right there. He had opportunities to get it done. Just didn't go his way. Of course, Dustin Poirier, very, very tough guy to finish, let alone beat inside the UFC octagon. Dustin Poirier picks up his 21st win in the UFC. Okay, let's get to this main card this weekend. Once again, it is at the UFC Apex. You can find it on ESPN Plus at 4 Eastern. You got the Black Beast, Derrick Lewis, taking on Sergey Spivac, and then a plethora of other main card fights there. It's a 5-fight main card where you're going to get into each of these in detail. But without further ado, let's talk about this main event, Ian. And Derrick Lewis, man, he's a fan favorite. Arguably the funniest guy in the UFC, one of the hardest hitters, of course, but it's been a tough year for him. If you look back last year at this time, he was coming off of a Chris Daukaus KO. I believe he was an underdog in that one, so he finished off the year spectacularly. But it's been tough sledding for Derrick Lewis. He is 0-2 in 2022 with 2 knockout losses. Sergey Spivac quietly doing some good work here in the UFC. What do we think about this main event?
This one, you know, I think Derrick Lewis kind of said it best. His back is absolutely up against the wall. 2 losses in a row, 2 finishes against him in a row, and they were really brutal ones. You know, for Derrick, I think, you know, we talk about styles make fights. The last 2, to me, made the most sense stylistically, and he's lost himself. You know, you can't just rely on that power anymore because his chin is not doing him any favors. He's not necessarily evolving. You know, he tried to wrestle with Tai Tuivasa, ended up tiring himself out. You know, it's just, we're seeing a less confident Derrick Lewis, which is really hard to watch because that's what made him also so great. He was confident coming forward. He wasn't worried about the power and the wrestling of other fighters. He would just, as we mentioned now several times, swang and bang, and usually he would come out on top, but he hasn't done that. And, you know, when you take that much damage in a short period of time, and he is someone that is emotional. You know, you see the mental aspect with him sometimes. You see when he's disappointed in his performance. Even then when he wins, you see when he does win how excited he gets. This has got to be hard for him. And I got to tell you, Brett, this is a very bizarre matchup to put him against when you're coming off 2 losses in a row. You're going against someone in Spivac who, first off, has been flying under the radar for a really long time. I think he's sneaky good. He's well-rounded, good hands, good cardio, good grappling. And he just finished 2 guys that are also strikers with power. someone in Augusto Sakai, who's had a lot of success in the UFC. Spivac made it look easy. And, you know, with him, he's in a good camp with Extreme Couture. He's got Captain Eric Nissick there. You know, he's got good everything behind him. He's streaking right now. I think this is a very good matchup for him to really get his name out there, have that star shine a little bit brighter. And as you're looking at that highlight, I kind of think that's foreshadowing what's going to happen in this fight. I think he uses the striking. I think he gets the fight to the floor. And I think he gets it done against Derrick Lewis.
Okay, so everything you're saying there makes total sense. I agree with you. You know, I like the way you put it, that Derrick Lewis has maybe kind of lost himself a little bit. And he's such a self-deprecating guy that it's hard sometimes to figure out exactly what's going on in Derrick Lewis's head. But how do his last fights impact your take on specifically the line? Because again, everything you said makes total sense, but I think it's reflected in the line, right? Spivac minus 190, Derrick Lewis plus 160. So as you look at sort of how his most recent performances are impacting this line, is there value here, or are we kind of paying top dollar here because of everything you said that, hey, it's pretty obvious here that Derrick Lewis is in a slump?
You know, I actually think this line on Spivac may go a little bit higher. You know, I think a lot of people are kind of getting that sense of Derrick Lewis that we know what he has to win. He's got to land that one shot. And if he doesn't, what other weapons does he have? You know, and now you're going to talk about taking away the self-confidence. He's now probably a little bit worried about getting hit. He doesn't look like he likes to get hit. You know, at one point, he kind of was like, oh, I'll eat one to give one, because he felt like my power was just heavier than taking the shot I was, you know, taking. And now, that just doesn't seem to be the case, and the line truly does reflect. I mean, look, minus 150 for Spivac to even get the finish, because Lewis isn't just losing. He's getting finished. He's getting knocked out brutally, and it's not something we're used to really seeing in a guy like Derrick Lewis. We're used to seeing the opposite, so I think the line is very telling of a guy who's lost his last 2 fights by finish going against a streaking fighter who's won against powerful strikers by finish.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you one thing I also like about this Spivac pick is sometimes, you know, everything can suggest that, yeah, this guy should maybe be 190 or possibly even higher, but it's the experience and it's the actual ability to perform on fight night. Spivac has been around for a minute. He has been around. He has had his already. He's had some losses before. This is not a guy coming in who is undefeated and all eyes are on him. Like, I think he's in a good spot mentally and just progression-wise in his career to hopefully have a good performance and not sort of freeze under those bright lights on Saturday. We will find out. Let's move to the 205-pound co-main event. Kennedy and Njoku taking on an interesting guy in Iwan Cutelaba. It's Cutelaba has lost his last 2 fights. He's 0-2 in 2022. He's done so as a favorite. This guy has been favored in his last 2 fights. You see that right there. Minus 200 against Johnny Walker, minus 240 against Ryan Spann. Lost both of those. And Njoku has been an interesting guy, man. Sometimes he looks great. Sometimes you see all the physical attributes that he has. He's under a good camp with Fortis MMA. Do you get a read on Kennedy and Njoku, and do you like him here at minus 175, or is that just a little too high on a guy who's maybe, you know, frankly, struggled with some consistency issues?
He's definitely struggled with consistency. However, what I would say, and you brought up a good point, the camp that he's with in Fortis MMA, that really showed in his last fight. In his last fight, he showed great fight IQ, good cardio, just really good everything. Kind of what we were looking for a few fights ago with him. You know, he didn't stand still. He wasn't keeping his head centered. He had good head movement, utilizing the wrestling, which we didn't even know he had. So it shows that that prospectus in him was correct. And I got to think that this matchup kind of makes sense for him. You have a guy in Cutelaba who is an absolute, you want to call him a Hulk? Sure. He's crazy. He's loud. He's aggressive. But he's not winning. You know, and he doesn't really make the best decisions. You know, against Ryan Spann, he took him down, but then he got guillotined, left his neck out there. Took Johnny Walker down, and then I believe he got triangle choked not too long later in the fight. So it almost seems to me that if Cutelaba can't control you or can't knock you out, he kind of gets lost in what to do and leaves himself open for submission. So if you do like Kennedy, this number is pretty solid. It's not too high yet. So I say, okay, go for it. However, I found a different play that I think makes a lot more sense. I like for this fight not to start round 3. I think either Cutelaba knocks off Kennedy's head into the next realm, or Kennedy possibly finishes him via submission. I just don't see this fight going the distance.
Okay, so a little bit of a lean there in terms of a side, but you like to go with the fight to not start round 3 there in the co-main event. Let's move to the heavyweight division here. Heavyweight heavyweight action on the main card, Ian, and it is Chase Sherman, who I'm pretty sure has just moved into the Apex. He's paying room and board over there. It seems like the guy is at the Apex all the time, and maybe it feels that way because he was actually supposed to fight 2 weeks ago. That fight got canceled against Jared Vanderaa. We spoke about that fight. We had some plays for that one. It did not end up happening. Instead, he's taken on Waldo Cortez here, and Sherman is a plus 180 underdog against Waldo, who we have not seen a whole lot, but I think you're pretty high on. Yes? What are your thoughts on this heavyweight fight?
You know what? I do like Waldo Cortez. He fought not too long ago against Jared Vanderaa, and, you know, what we saw was a guy who, he's still pretty green in MMA. There's no question there. However, his cardio looked good. He came forward. He had good strikes. He was able to take punches. The one thing he wasn't really great at was checking those calf kicks, and you saw that impacted his power as the fight went on. Now, he is fighting someone, Chase Sherman, who, look, Chase had a really bad losing streak. He got to win. I just think in this fight, for Sherman, if he doesn't kind of follow the blueprint of Vanderaa, meaning the leg kicks, and land more, I don't see where else he really wins. You know, there's experience there, sure, as he fought better level competition. Yeah, but he's taken a lot of damage in his career. And in this fight, to me, it's going to come down to the athleticism, the speed, and the pressure. And to me, that really favors Waldo Cortez Acosta here. Now, that number at minus 220, you know, my baseline is normally minus 200. And over the last few weeks, I have played that number up a little bit if I really feel strongly here. And I do. I feel strongly about Acosta because I just don't see where Sherman dangers him. I don't think he's going to outbox him. I don't think he's going to take him down. You know, I don't think the calf kicks are going to be that damaging to the point where Cortez won't be able to move forward. So I'm going to go with Cortez here. If that number goes any higher, I would look to then take Cortez inside the distance.
Okay, yeah, I like it. That's good advice because, you know, sometimes as bettors, we just don't want to take anything maybe over 200. But if you still see value in it and you think that this guy has a safe path to victory, I mean, it's MMA. There's never really a completely safe path to victory. But if there's value on minus 220, then there's value on minus 220, and we want to soak up all the value that we can. Okay, we've talked a lot about heavyweight action, light heavyweight action. Let's get to two fights that I think are arguably better fights than the top three that we've talked about, and that is Andre Fialho taking on Muslim Salikhov. Fialho has had a super interesting year in the UFC. If you remember, he came in on short notice back in January. This is his fifth fight this year, which I actually think was probably too much, and I think that has had some impact on his performances, but he has had a little bit of a break here, now taking on Salikhov, who has been quietly doing some very, very good work in the UFC. Number very close, Salikhov minus 115 against Fialho minus 105. What do you think of this one, Ian?
To me, this is going to be the difference between the power of Fialho versus the volume and the grappling of Salikhov. You know, with Salikhov, we've seen him in a lot of fights where he will lead the dance, and he just kind of gets comfortable, lets up, and then gets rocked. You know, against the leech, that's exactly what happened here. And Fialho, you know, to me, he just moves that pressure, that power, and he can take some shots. However, how much damage with the Jake Matthews fight is that going to play into factors here? You know, I think that Salikhov just presents a lot of weapons. I think overall he's the better fighter. I think people are that line possibly moved a little bit because originally Salikhov was a little bit of a bigger favorite, maybe because of, you know, it's not the first time he's been rocked in a fight. But for me, I like Salikhov here. I think if he could mix up the wrestling, takes away from the power of Fialho, I think he can get it done that way.
Okay, yeah, super interesting fight there. I'm very curious to see how that fight plays out, of course. And again, the odds reflect that. It's a very, very competitive fight. And a pretty important one at 170. You know, the winner of this one is going to move on, of course, and get and sort of kind of be elevated up the ladder at 170. Obviously not into a kind of like big name marquee fight, but the winner of this is going to find themselves in a matchup that could potentially get them into the top 15, top 10 next year. Let's move on to Jack Della Maddalena, a guy who I'm excited to talk about, taking on Danny Roberts. Maddalena has had a lot of early success in the UFC. He's turned some heads, of course, with some quick finishes. He's 2-0 with 2 first-round knockouts, taking on a guy in Danny Roberts, 35. A lot of experience with Danny Roberts. He's only fought twice in the last 3 years, though. Part of that was COVID-related with the pandemic. What do we think of this fight? Obviously, Maddalena coming in a big-time favorite, minus 550.
I think the reason for it being outside of the obvious, he's a blue chip prospect. Everyone's falling in love with the striking, the fight IQ, the angles he's taking, and of course, that finish rate. It's the matchup he's getting here. He's fighting someone, Danny Roberts, who just got rocked a bunch of times by Francisco Trinaldo, and Roberts has been finished quite often in his career. Maddalena, I think this is a really good matchup for him. I think he's going to get an opponent who's going to stand there with him. Even if Roberts is to try and wrestle, Maddalena does have good takedown defense. Hasn't been tested a ton. This will be a nice little litmus test for that next level, if you want to call it that. Look, Madalena needs to get in the cage and fight, and he had a hard time getting that opponent, so I'm happy to see him in there. I do think if he gets this done, which I'm confident he will, it would be by TKO or KO, because I just think Robert's chin is just not there anymore.
Yeah, Madalena, one of those guys who has the potential for breakout potential in 2023, but he's got to take care of business here first. And if he gets a big knockout against Danny Roberts, it's going to set him up for some fun stuff in 2023. Okay, that rounds out our main card. Again, that's on ESPN+. A lot of prelims to discuss, of course, and we will get to all of Ian will run through all of his prelim picks here in a second. But let's go to a featured prelim. That's a 125-pound division. Zhalgas Zhumagulov, 14-7, taking on Charles Johnson, a former LFA champion who came in to fight Muhammad Makayev earlier this year, lost that fight, but I think was more competitive than some people anticipated. He is the favorite here at -165. What do we think of the odds here at 125?
You know what? The odds make a lot of sense to me. Being an LFA champ, I think, does carry some value. That fight against Muhammad Makayev, it showed us that he belongs here. That is not an easy fight to make on short notice, your UFC debut, and he did not shy away from it. He didn't get finished. He went the full distance. He did land some shots. And look, getting out grappled by Makayev is really, a lot of people are going to fall into that over the course of Makayev's career. However, I think this is a great bounce back fight. I think he's fighting someone in Zhalgas who we know what he's going to do. He's going to plot forward. He's going to throw wild hooks. When it comes to the grappling exchange, I think Charles Johnson has the advantage pretty much everywhere. He just needs to get a win in the UFC. I think these odds make sense. I do like Johnson in this spot.
Yeah, you said it. He needs to get a win in the UFC. Anytime you come into the UFC, you're all excited. Of course, you get that big contract, get that opportunity to fight in the octagon. You lose your first fight. There's a lot of pressure to win that second one because you don't want your stay in the UFC to be a short one. Okay, so that's our featured prelim. But Ian, you got looks and advice on all of the prelims. So why don't you go ahead and run us through the rest of them, which you can find at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+.
You got it. All right, so we're going to go Charles Johnson at -165. I would play that as high as -175. Jennifer Maia versus Marina Moroz. Look, Moroz looked fantastic in her last fight, and Maia, in my opinion, keeps getting not so much worse, but kind of stale and stagnant. We're going Marina Moroz there. I just think she's better everywhere in that fight. Miles John is taking this fight on short notice, but where Vince Morales is good, Johns is better. He has the wrestling. If he utilizes that, he should get the win there. Ricky Turcios versus Kevin Natividad. Look, Turcios in that last fight, that was a tough one for him. Here, I think he's getting an opponent that's more tailor-made to his style, so we will lean Turcios. I like Oliveira in this next fight against Vanessa Demopoulos. I think Oliveira, she should get the win here. Vanessa, I think, lucked out on that scorecard in that last fight. And then we're going to move on. Brady Heistand versus Freddie Garcia. I believe that the fight, this says, does not go the distance. And then, last but not least, keep an eye on Natalie Silva. Her last fight, she came in as a pretty big underdog against a top prospect on the Contender Series. She was known for being an armbar, submission specialist, yet her striking looked fantastic. She looked flawless. She's fighting a UFC newcomer. Give me Natalie Silva all day in that fight.
Well, you said it, man. I mean, this card is sandwiched between two stronger cards, if we're being honest. I mean, UFC 281 was fantastic, of course, and then you fast forward a little bit past the Thanksgiving, then you've got the card in Orlando, which is an outstanding card. So maybe overlooking this one a little bit, but from a betting standpoint, a lot of close odds on this card, a lot of opportunities to get some strong leans and possibly make some money. And let's get to how we're going to make money on this card with your parlay first. What are we doing with the parlay this week?
All right, so just to give everyone a heads up again, if you get to that final leg and you want to hedge or you have a website where cash out are available and you profit, take it. So we're going to go Louis Spivac, fight not to start round 4. Kennedy versus Iwan Kutalaba, fight to not go the distance. Sherman Acosta-Cortez, fight to not start round 3. And Jack Della Maddalena, just to get it done on the money line, at plus 222 with 4 pretty heavy-duty numbers here. Let's get it done.
Yes, very chalky, but a not-so-chalky payout, plus 222 at the end of it if we can hit that 4-teamer. Let's move on to the best bets for UFC Fight Night.
If you thought that was chalky, hold your breath, Brett. All right, so
oh boy,
Natalie Silva at -170. You know what? Listen, I was trying to find some dog spots, some plus money. We'll get to that in a second, but hey, I'm here to pick the best plays. I think we got this. I'm giving out 6 plays this week. Natalie Silva, based on her last performance, that is a must play all the way up to -185. Her opponent not fighting any type of UFC level competition. Even her competition outside the UFC was not even close to what Silva fought in her first fight. Marina Moroz over Jennifer Maia. Charles Johnson. Jack Della Maddalena by KO, TKO. He's got to get this done against Roberts, who's very chinny, hands down, not a lot of head movement. Perfect fight for him. Waldo Cortez Acosta, minus 220. And last but not least, the main event, we are going to go Sergey Spivac at that number.
Yep, and you mentioned it is a little bit of a chalky card, but listen, the worst thing you can do is force any kind of bets. And I'm telling the viewers right now that Ian Parker, he understands that you guys are putting actual money. You are having action on these plays. So the last thing he's going to do for good TV or for whatever the case is to give you a play that he doesn't believe in. So sometimes we are going to be a little chalky, but you do have a little bit of an alternate way to bet the fights if you don't want to lay all that chalk. Yeah, Ian?
Yeah, you know what? I appreciate the layup there. So, look, if you don't want to lay those chalk on those top two plays, the Waldo Cortez Acosta or the Sergey Spivac, take both of them inside the distance. You'll cut that juice down quite a bit from minus 190 to minus 150, and the other one from minus 210 or minus 220 to minus 110. I truly believe both fights happen that way, but sometimes I'm personally willing to pay the extra juice just to take the favorites and get it done in that spot. But if you don't like that, here's two alternative suggestions for the best bets.
Well, and you might be traumatized with the Waldo Cortez Acosta fight, right? Because he didn't get it done inside the distance. Otherwise, I think we would have hit our parlay the last time he fought. But let's get to something that's definitely not going to be chalky. It's our long shot parlay. Where are we going for a big payout this weekend?
You were right. Him not getting inside the distance cost us the long shot, but hopefully you guys cashed out prior. We're going Mario Oliveira at minus 125. Jack Della Maddalena back to that prop. By TKO, TKO. Or even DQ, hey, however he wins. Muslim Salikov at minus 115. Waldo Cortez Acosta, the two props we just spoke about, I'm putting them in my long shot. By KO, TKO, or DQ, minus 105. And Sergey Spivac as the last part of the long shot parlay. And plus 2407 again. I know it's not that 40-1 that you love, Brett, but hey, plus 24, not too bad.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of started the long shot parlay for fun, you know, but now I'm taking it very serious. After you hit the 40-1, this is no fun. This is serious business. I expect to hit this thing, and 24-1 is not too bad of a payout. All right, so enjoy the fights this weekend, UFC Fight Night. Next weekend, no show. It is holiday weekend, Thanksgiving. Any Thanksgiving plans for you, Ian?
You know what? A little bit of family dinner and then possibly some MMA next week to check out, but we're going to prepare for Orlando and then UFC 282.
I'm going to have a glass of wine by 9 a.m. and watch some football. It's going to be glorious. I hope you all enjoy your time, enjoy the fights, enjoy Thanksgiving, and we will see you back here for the Orlando show in December. See ya.